Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the EUI Cyber Direct for hosting us today. My name is Christian Perrone, and my colleague is Amy Ertan. We are both, we are both doctoral researchers, and this project and this paper is based on a project sponsored by the UK government to the ITS, which stands for Institute for Technology and Society of Rio de Janeiro, where I work as a senior researcher, and Amy worked as a fellow last summer. So the topic discussed today, what is the gap that we want to close, is about cybersecurity in 5G technology. And the particular political options and policy issues that we're going to discuss, it's how to arrange governance under this sector, particularly on the multi-stakeholder governance. So Amy, can you explain to us a little bit about what are the main implication and security issues regarding 5G technology?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Christian. So if we go to our first slide. So just to kind of offer the context about what 5G is and why we think this is an important question. When we talk about 5G connectivity, we're talking about next generation Wi-Fi kind of systems. We're talking about greater internet connectivity, greater speeds, and greater reliability too. And this is billed as a transformative technology in terms of everything over our society, whether it's smart cities, or autonomous vehicles, healthcare, defense, and the way we operate in our home with internet connected devices too. And of course, with great opportunity, you have the associated cybersecurity and wider security challenges and privacy implications too. And we'll discuss this and the categories of security threat that require comprehensive approaches to governing too. So just to kick off, if we could go to the next slide, I wanted to start by highlighting the nature of the 5G ecosystem and actually how many different aspects there are to consider when you look at the 5G supply chain. So if you see the kind of image on the middle left here, you have a relatively small number of system suppliers, which has its own kind of implications for acquisition and who you choose to provide your technology, as we'll see later. But actually, when you take a step back, you have kind of a number of entities and a competitive marketplace when you look at everything from chip manufacturers to wider equipment manufacturer and maintenance, and those who are involved in standard setting, for example. Now, within the paper, we outline that actually any governance approach needs to be able to engage with kind of providers along the entire supply chain. And we do kind of refer to the cliche that your security posture is only as strong as your weakest link. So that's the first point that I want to raise. And then if we can go to the next slide, talking about kind of the categories of security threat, when you come to kind of talking about 5G technologies, you can broadly break it down into 4 kinds of threat. So the first would be kind of deliberate and malicious actions. So there really is kind of a wide range of things that an attacker could do here, kind of by compromising or gaining unauthorized access to 5G infrastructure or end user devices. You can de-anonymize users by system identifiers. You can kind of surveil and do widespread surveillance if you get into kind of supplier systems. You can disrupt or attempt to break a system, which has major implications, again, when you think about kind of implementation across smart city and kind of critical sectors. Our second category is system design flaws, and indeed kind of system design flaws in hardware or software can enable malicious actors. So vulnerabilities, technical vulnerabilities, and kind of some of the classical cybersecurity challenges can mean that there are challenges to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of connectivity and kind of 5G infrastructure. Now, our third category, benevolent implementation, refers to perhaps well-intentioned kind of initiatives, but unintended consequences. So one of these might be that with the rise of kind of internet connected devices, you will have a rise of insecure devices connected to the internet, which can be compromised either to use as part of a wider cyber attack. So for example, to kind of amplify the power of a denial of service attack, or just to compromise the end user device and gain information or disrupt that way. And our large category, talking about social, economical, and cultural diversity, so really taking a step back and looking at kind of key concepts like privacy, and what does privacy mean across kind of 5G, and also sovereignty. How can a state appropriately govern technology which doesn't have borders? So if we can go to the next slide, we can illustrate kind of these challenges very neatly with a very pertinent and prominent example, which is across all our news feeds at the moment, and that's Huawei, and really quite critical questions across the world from states about Huawei's integrity and whether Huawei can be trusted in the supply chain, providing critical kind of infrastructure for 5G technology. And it kind of boils down to the challenge that kind of Huawei can be considered to be a national security concern because of questions around its independence from the Chinese state. And this is kind of a neat example which kind of raises that the challenges around 5G are not just technical. There are some kind of technical issues, but you also have the geopolitical angle, the strategic angle, and of course the economic angle. Huawei is kind of one of the main providers, so actually choice is an issue in that sense too. What recent news has also shown is this is a very neat example of a lack of comprehensive governance. We see policies kind of differing widely between states around the world and also within a state over time, with, for example, the US on the one hand allowing Huawei to kind of work with companies to set standards, and on the other hand imposing severe restrictions within the same month. And we see similar pressures and domestic pressures in the UK. So a number of kind of types of challenges that a governance approach must address. So Christian will now illustrate kind of some of the options for governance, as well as outlining our preferred option for governance.
So thank you very much, Amy. Amy has very eloquently underlined and showcased what are the main issues that we are dealing now, particularly what it is, the scenario that we have on cybersecurity and security issues under the 5G new technology aspect. So on one side, we have geopolitical issues connected to, for instance, the Huawei problem. And the other side, we have governance arrangements and issues related specifically to how to manage and deploy safely and securely 5G networks in general, how to manage those networks in the future. So on the geopolitical side, there are a few approaches that are possible under this new geopolitical arrangement. One of them is an isolationist model based on independence and autonomy. So the countries themselves or the regions themselves will only allow actors that are within their borders to participate. They are considered just at an extent de facto trusted actors just because they have control over them. There's another model based on a partnership model or a like-minded trusted actors that can be allowed to participate both in the deployment and management of the 5G network and 5G technologies in general. On the other side of the spectrum, we have a very open model based on establishing levels of security and privacy that have to be attended and be met by any different actor that actually wants to participate in the deployment and management of 5G technology. And there's a final one, which is a hybrid model based on risk management approaches. So it's not that you're going to block whole categories of actors based on nationality or anything like that, but it is actually based on the risk management of each in specific actor that when they are considered less of a risk, and then they are considering less of a risk, so they can participate in this 5G deployment of 5G management in the future. But this is just one side of the problem. The other side connects with the dynamics of risks that you are going to be facing. Risks are not only specific and are not only geopolitical, they're not only economical, but it's a broad array of risks that are there. And to one side, you can have a governance policy regime based on what the industry can think and what are the industry first. So the industry arranges the technical standards, and how you manage those risks based on these technical standards, you have responsibility, accountability, and liability. This is basically the way many of the 3G and 4G networks have been deployed in the past. But also you have another model based on governmental regulation. The government sets by themselves what are the goals, what are the targets, what are the standards for security and privacy. And industry has to follow. When industry doesn't follow it, then there are sanctions that will recur. A third potential model is based on a partnership between industry and government. So the government established some minimum standards, established some goals, and under a license or concession regimes, the industry has to follow those and has a little bit of a leeway in how to implement those standards and how they have to be connected with the broad overall cybersecurity and security in general, and specific privacy and data protection regimes that are in the country. And there is the fourth one that actually allows all the stakeholders to participate, which is multi-stakeholder approach, which is based not only on what the government can regulate, what the industry can bring on a technical basis, but also what the broad society can bring, at least in their views of what are the impacts and actually also in potential solutions that can be achieved through societal models or specific issues that can be raised from their perspective. So you have government, private sector, academia, technical community, and civil society as well. Under this final model, we were thinking about how do we approach this on a very practical level. Is there any other model that has worked? And from that matter, we have looked at a Brazilian Internet Steering Committee that has been considered by many as a very successful arrangement and multi-stakeholder arrangement. So the CGY.br, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, has a few principles that guarantees this success of their multi-stakeholder model. And on the paper, we have underlined there are at least a few principles. Those that we're going to mention are inclusion. What I mean about inclusion is that the composition of the committee is very open for the different stakeholders, and they can not only participate in the committee itself as representatives, but the activities of the committee are open for different stakeholders, different actors to partake on them. Another principle is in autonomy, because, well, in many cases, one of the main critique is that mood stakeholders just give a stamp of legitimacy to what it is actually decisions made by either industry or government. So when the representatives are basically appointed, there's a lot of power involved in choosing them. But when they are in the selection process guarantees their autonomy, for instance, under an open and free election, then you guarantee a lot more their impartiality and their representative status. But this has to be also buttressed by a principle of financial independence as well, so that they are not dependent on governmental resources nor private sector donations. In the case of the CGY, what they have is a source of income based on the fees of administering the domain name .br, which is the basic source of their income, which guarantees their independence. A final way we are thinking about a principle that you have to guarantee the success of this multi-stakeholder model is through their normative structure, how you base the normative decision, how's the decision-making process welcoming, inclusive, and this is based on the idea that it has to be on a consensual basis, so that all stakeholders, all points of view have to be heard. So, Amy, now that we have already set the scenario and put the policy options available, what are our conclusions now?
Thanks, Christian. So, through this presentation, we've outlined kind of the nature of the 5G kind of ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem, and also the broad categories of security threats and the very different types of technical, geopolitical, supply chain as a whole security threats that should be considered when trying to govern the space. We've also kind of outlined different options and explained kind of why we think that multi-stakeholder governance is the most preferred option. So we have much more detail on this in our paper. I'm going to stop recording now and we can open up for questions.